Welcome to the Zachrilege cast, the number one atheist podcast in the known universe, starting with the letter Z. What is this show? Well, I interview atheists. I'm an atheist. That means I believe in no gods, especially yours. I deal with your tax breaks, pedophile priests, and most importantly, 1,000-year-old unproven claims. You deal with me talking to other cool people, learn their stories and projects, and we have a pleasant hour. This is episode 126. I'm recording live on January 3rd, 2018. Happy third anniversary, Zachrilege cast. That's right. This is year 3 of the show. Haven't quit yet for some.
Congratulations.
Although some listeners, readers, whatever, watchers will be disappointed. I'm drinking tangerine juice, a little booze break, but we're still in the we're gonna curse. Guests can drink for me. It's a beautiful thing. So I would like to thanks to Deb, aka Heretic Woman, aka my middle name is Haram, for being on last week to introduce us all to a new important podcast, Full Quranic. Support her and support fine podcasts everywhere. Also support the fact that she also was the last guest on. So tonight's guest, Hertzey Hertz, is the producer and co-host of the Atheists Talks radio show. That means I need to use my serious voice for a few minutes. Atheists Talk, we'll get it straight at some point, has done 435 episodes in my face Flanders. She also likes Star Wars references and has a pretty wicked radio voice. Welcome to the show.
I've never had someone to comment on my radio voice, so that's good to know.
Well, one thing you learn over 3 years of shows is, I have some privilege. I think part of that is always like commenting on when a guy has a good radio voice, but when a woman has a good radio voice, it doesn't really come up. And I'm like, no, you have a good one. So, and people will get to hear it for the next hour because that's what it's all about. I will start, as I always do, with some out of context quotes that I have. I'll be your Krampus. God is more evil than Darth Vader. Rising bread is yeast farts.
I may know that last one.
So can you feel your fingers and toes right now? Are you tired of talking about the weather? If you were listening to this in June, by the way, January 2018 was really fucking cold everywhere in the country, as far as I can tell. But right now, Minnesota is really far north. So how are you doing with that?
I'm actually doing pretty good. I live in a condo building, so heat is actually pretty decent. But yeah, it is amazingly cold. Like I have a coworker who her roommate, his battery has completely died because of the cold. They have to get a new battery in. Yeah. It's brutal out there and you don't want to stay out very long.
Well, I remember a friend of mine who did like an internship at a newspaper in Minneapolis. And one thing people had in their cars was they had like remote starters so they could actually get their car warmed up before they got in because, I remember that as like. Yeah,
because a lot of cars you can't leave your key in the ignition and then lock it. Because then what people would do is they'd have one key in the ignition, they lock it, and then you have the other key to get back in. But you can't really do that anymore because the cars will auto unlock. So yeah, the remote start was a big thing for us. We were like, I can start the car and have it locked and stay here in the house where it's warm.
Yeah, it's really technology. Like I can't imagine how people lived in the South in the summer and a lot of the United States for that matter before we had like air conditioning because it's pretty bad. And then you think about the winters and how cold it gets. And I went to high school in Kansas City where it was really cold in the winter and then really hot in the summer. So we got both. And that's so lovely.
Oh, yeah. Summers here it's like we usually have a polar blast where it gets super cold. And then we'll have like a hot blast where it gets crazy hot and humid. And those are the 2 weeks of the year that I'm a hermit.
Now, where exactly in Minnesota are you located?
I am located in Minneapolis. So kind of in the Twin Cities in the metropolitan area.
Okay. Well, we brought you on this week to talk about Atheists Talk. You get to be the representative of the show. So, what is kind of like the elevator pitch for the show?
So, Atheist Talk is a live radio show, which means we're actually on the airwaves. We record/air Sunday mornings at 9 o'clock. And it's generally, we just talk about things that we think atheists would be interested in. We actually host a wide variety of topics, anywhere from social things that are going on. For example, we did a couple of shows about the Women's March last year, and we did one about the Science March. And then, actually, we did two on the Science March. That was fun. And then we'll also do like random shows. Like one day, I was like, we've had way too much serious stuff. We're going to do a show about technology and science fiction that has come true, that has actually happened. And that was fun. And I actually really want to do another one of those.
Yeah, I think it does get a little bit heavy. I know I noticed my podcast feed. It's just like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm learning things, but man, it's kind of depressing when you hear the news right now and then talking about what's happening. Okay, but this is a show that's been going for a while, of course.
Oh, yes.
435 was last week. So do you have the story behind how this got started? Has it been a radio show the whole time?
It has, actually. So it was started about 10 years ago. One of the Minnesota Atheist board members had gone to, I believe it was a American Atheist Convention, and he went, or was it Freedom from Religion? One of the two. But he went up to one of the guys and said, you guys should do a radio show in Minnesota. And he turned to August and said, why don't you do it? And basically they found a place that would let him do it. And that was kind of the start. This Sunday, the 7th, will be our 10-year official anniversary. And I have several directors or producers from before, and then also some people who've been with the show the whole time. We're going to be coming in, and we're just going to talk about like shows from the past and what their favorite shows were, stuff like that.
You've earned a clip show if 10 years, but you had the best guest. Sounds good. Now, I mean, one of the first atheist shows I ever discovered was the Atheist Experience, which is out of Austin and kind of is in a similar vein that it was produced by a local like atheist group. Mm-hmm. Although that show seems to have a lot of like Christian callers. Do you get like Christian guests or callers, or do you pretty much keep it to the like secular side?
On occasion, we do have callers. It's not very often. Some of the callers are actually members of Minnesota Atheists, and they just want to go on and, they're taking an interest in the topic, and so they want to share something. Those are sometimes my favorite because, it's learning something about people I know. We do get the incredibly rare Christian caller. The last one was quite a while ago. They don't really call very often. I guess they're in church or something.
So the show, what time is the show?
9 a.m.
So it's not on Sundays. Anyone actually told you like, hey, I listened to this on the way to church? Like maybe someone who's still kind of closeted?
No, not really.
And it's not just you, right? You have other co-hosts, kind of a rotating situation. Is that right?
Sort of. So we have a group of volunteers, dedicated and amazing volunteers. There's Maddie, who actually does this show. She has her own podcast which I think is Minnesota Trans Atheist. Dan and Jordan are kind of the main volunteers. Oh, and Steve. Steve is in the background. He doesn't go on the air very often, but he's big. Oh, and Scott. So yeah, that's kind of our main volunteer base, and those guys are super helpful. We get together once a month. We kind of figure out what do we want to do, what shows do we want to put on, who's going to do it.
Well, how long ago did you get the job as like producer? And what was that? Was there an interview process, or did they just say, "Hey, get on the air, you do this"?
Well, it actually started because a couple of friends of mine and I wanted to take 1 week of the month and just do that was going to be our week. We were going to do the show. what ended up happening is the previous producer, unfortunately, she just got overwhelmed. She had a lot of stuff going on, and so she had to step down. And it was like, well, you kind of know what's going on. Do you want to do it for now? And I was like, okay. And then eventually it just kind of became a thing.
Now, is there like a big spreadsheet somewhere that has like every topic and every guest you've had? Are
Yep.
you like, do you find like, oh no, I'm running out of stuff? Kind of like, was it Noah doing his diatribes because he's like on number 350? Like, do you
I
feel
know.
like the pressure to not repeat, or you don't worry about it at this point?
Some of the ones I don't worry about. Luna, what are you doing? Cats. But
Guest
yeah, so
cats, people check. That's why you check the video out for bonus cat content.
oh yes. Granted, I have the halo, so it might be hard to see. But yeah, so depends on how old the content is. If something was done a few years ago, I don't mind rehashing it because, things change. People change, ideas change, science changes. If it was, within the last couple years, less likely, but we really haven't had much of a problem with that.
Now, this is usually a question I'll ask guests, although the timing of your show probably answers it for you. Do you recommend that people drink while listening to the show, and do you drink while recording?
I don't, partly because I have to drive to the studio, so then I
Ooh.
have to drive back. Um, I I would love to do like a patron only episode where we, I don't know, maybe review a movie or something, and then I get completely blasted. That would be awesome.
So kind of a a dream situation. You can pull it off. Yeah, with
Yes.
Patreon, you can definitely try different stuff.
Oh yes. I really like having patron only stuff.
So do you have like favorite guests and or topics you've done on the show? And it doesn't necessarily have to be that, but maybe just something that
Mhm.
kind of surprised you that was an interesting topic that you hadn't thought of before.
Oh, one of my favorite shows. I have so many of those. So it was Maddie and I, we were going to be doing an interview of a singer-songwriter whose name escapes me at the moment. Um, but we were having some technical difficulties talking to her. And this is also the first time Maddie and I had met face to face. And we're looking at each other and the clock is ticking and we have to do something. And I go, do you want to talk about diversity in Star Wars? And we spent about two-thirds of the show talking about Star Wars and the diversity and how interesting it was. So that was one of my favorites. Um, oh, what else is there? I'm a huge geek, so anything geeky will always be kind of in that realm. Another one was actually a coworker of mine came in and he and his partner came in and they talked about toxic masculinity. That one was great. And actually, one that I want to go further into because it was just a really interesting topic.
Now, what is the restaurant you refer to on the show that I think sponsored it that
Ah,
has the magical salad bar you've talked about?
yes. Cucumbers restaurant in Edina. It's a buffet. It's an all you can eat. What's really interesting is they have a huge salad bar. Like that is their main thing is the salad bar, which is really nice because it kind of promotes healthy eating and such. Um, but it's a really good place. They've got some good food. And I think it's local. I think there's only like one or two locations in the Twin Cities.
And I'm sorry, I've been a derelict in my duties. I usually talk about what people are drinking on the show at the beginning. What do you have
Oh,
like a
yes.
you have like a starter, like a warm up drink, and then you have a backup. What do you have for tonight?
I I have a Not Your Father's root beer, which is one of my favorite drinks. That company also has a Not Your Mother's apple pie, which is also really good, but I don't have one. And then I have a pumpkin cider. Whoa, sorry, cat. A pumpkin cider that I've added rum to.
That sounds like a serious beverage. That's the kind of beverage will keep you warm, right? If the
Yeah,
cats
sure.
don't.
Grimm is still on my lap, so that's pretty good.
Now, did the singer-songwriter who had technical difficulties ever get back on?
Yes, we were able to get a hold of her during the third segment, and so we were able to at least do part of the interview.
Excellent. I was trying to look up. Was it Shelley Siegel? That's the one that's like the name that's very
Yes, that
popular.
one.
Excellent. Yeah,
Yeah, her.
because she was in Australia, but I think she moved to LA. But I've
Hmm.
yeah, met her at one of the Reason Cons, which was very nice. Now, I haven't done this in a couple weeks, so I'm going to go ahead and throw this in, even though it's relatively early in the show. I like to do live reads just to support either shows I like or talk about stuff that's going on in my life. So real quick, this is something that happened, of course, at the end of the year, because you always think at the end of the year, hey, donate to charities because of, you get the tax break the next year. So if you do have a chance or a buck, donate to causes you believe in. So I donated to American Atheists, Secular Student Alliance, and Camp Quest.
Camp Quest. My parents are actually on the board for the Camp Quest up north, or my
Cool.
mom is.
Is it in your area? Is it Minnesota? There's one?
Yeah, there's one in Minnesota and then also Iowa. I think they've expanded to Iowa. So yeah, my dad works as a counselor during the summer, and then mom is on the board.
Well, that's excellent. Yeah. Yeah, I thought American Atheist because I listened to an interview with David Silverman recently because he always makes the rounds. Secular Student Alliance, both Secular Student Alliance and Camp Quest were featured on David Smalley's 24-hour podcast-a-thon the last 2 years. And I figured, they're not getting that same boost this year, so I would donate to them. Now, of course, I have to find other sources for my charity giving because I've kind of given up on the whole David Smalley situation. But if people feel free to let me know where you think money should be best spent, because one benefit of being an atheist is you ain't tithing to shit.
Modest Needs is one that I like a lot.
I've heard of that one, right? It's like small, like loans to people.
Hmm. Yeah, Noah, Heath, and Eli, and then Tom and Cecil, they did the Vulgarity for Charity last year, and that was the charity they chose.
And they raised a ton of money for any charity they pick out, and that's
Hmm.
one thing that doesn't get highlighted on the occasional cat fighting, if it were, between people in the podcasting community and just atheists in general, and just human beings in general. Sometimes we do good things and we should highlight it. So that's what I decided to do. Now, one advantage of you being on this show is you don't have any of those progressive radio shackles on you, and you get to speak your mind, speak freely in a way that everyone can understand. So can you tell at least one bad joke that would keep you from Minnesota Atheist high office?
Mm, which is the reason I do not run for president, which I've said multiple times on the show. What do you call a dead baby at the bottom of the ocean?
Oh boy, what
A good start.
a good start. Wow. It's like
Uh,
baby humor. It's early.
I know. How do you make a dead baby dance?
Tell me.
You put it in a blender and you turn it on.
Oh man. Wow. Where'd you get this dark side? Oh wait. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the cats. Totally the cats. Which is funny because when it comes to Star Wars, I am definitely Rebel, not Empire.
Oh, they feel like a lot of Empire followers are popular these days.
Mm,
Will you talk about the Minnesota Atheists because they sponsor the show? They started the show. Is this really a statewide organization, or is it more focused on the kind of Twin Cities area that you're in?
yes. I
It's
hate to
both.
be
Okay.
vague about that.
Mhm.
Um, we do have we do have a large meetup community, and most of it is actually focused on the Twin Cities. But we do have people from like Brainerd or from other more rural areas who do try to do some of that stuff on their own. There's not a lot of them. Minnesota is similar to other states in that way, where you know in the cities you have a larger concentration, but the further out you go, you get more and more people who are just more religious. Um, so They do try to do some of that stuff. Oftentimes they'll come in for some of our bigger events. Like we do a Saints game. The Saints are a minor league baseball team here, and we sponsor one of their games. So they do an atheist night.
That's
And
right. I've heard of that. Don't they have like special?
uh
Because they're not the Saints that night. They're the Aints. Is that correct?
Ain't, which it was until last year. I'm not sure if we're going to try and do that again. Full disclosure, I'm also on the board of Minnesota Atheists. So I think we might try and do that again this year. The Saints were talking about, looking at different ways to brand. So we'll see. We'll see what they come up with. But yeah, it was that they were the Mr. Paul Aints, and I even have T-shirts that say that.
Yeah, I remember I was like looking like, can I buy a jersey or a shirt because I just like that
Yes,
idea
yes, you
that
can.
they. Yes, you can.
Yes. During the right before the game, you can actually even get the jerseys similar to what the actual players wear, because well, all the players get a jersey with the changed logo, and then they'll sign them, and then we actually auction them off at the end.
Now, one thing I know about sports is a lot of the players in there are quite religious. Do people actually like react negatively toward that?
We have had a couple of players who have stated that they did not want to play, and I think last year we had one who stepped back and said, "I'm not going to do it," and we're just kind of like, okay. It's kind of fun because if you look at the signatures, the players will sign it and then put a cross on there or something like that. But there's not a lot of complaints from the players themselves that I've heard. The managers might know a little bit more, the team managers.
Yeah, I would guess out of all the negative feedback, this is just like, all right, it is one. It's not like, oh, you have to wear this every day, and it's not
Hmm.
even probably necessarily required. Now, do they do a lot of sport, like minor league sports teams? I like because they do kind of take chances with different kind of jerseys. Do they do kind of a Star Wars type event? Because it seems very, very popular.
I think last year they did. I'm part of a geek community as well. And I want to say they did because I was actually thinking about going and then looked at the finances and went, nope, not going to be able to do it this year.
Well, that's unfortunate.
Now, if they do another one, I'll see if I can go.
Yeah, I was just curious about that because there's so many like secular groups in town. I just
Hmm.
never get involved. I'm like, what is it like to actually like hang out with atheists more often than once or twice a year? So I just
It's
wanted to know.
it's actually a lot of fun. I've met amazing and wonderful friends through Minnesota Atheists. I go to their board gaming night every week. Um, you'd be surprised how often atheism itself is not discussed. There's a whole host of issues that people will talk about, and every so often it comes up, but not very.
Yeah, it's kind of like the show. I feel like initially it was always about, hey, so what's your religious background? And now it's just like, well, what do you do? And what do you like?
Mhm.
What's who are you as a person? Not this thing that you're not. I mean, I don't know. Some people are more attached than others. But I was just curious, and since you're in Minnesota and you're on a progressive radio station, as someone who lives in Atlanta, what's this progressive radio thing?
Um, Full disclosure, I actually don't listen to the station much outside of when we're on. Um, I do know that they get progressive shows from either in town or sometimes they'll get them from out of state, and play them. Right before us, actually, is Philosophy Talk. And so when I go into the studio, usually they're playing the last bits of that. And that one's actually pretty interesting. That's one that I've actually thought about looking to see if I can get the podcast for.
Yeah, I had like Embrace the Void on a few weeks ago, and they kind of talk about philosophy, and they were talking about philosophy podcasts, and it made me realize every podcast has like 1,000 podcasts, whatever subject you're talking about, and it's like, Oh yeah, we're one of the of this type of like philosophy. Like there are a bunch of philosophy podcasts. Okay, I get it. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Every
I've actually
opposite.
I've been working on the true crime podcast area for a little bit now.
Yeah, those are
That's been a lot of fun.
super popular. S Town, I think, was one that I listened to with my wife. I mean, that's kind of sort of they kind of started as a true crime podcast and just became the story about this one interesting dude in like Alabama. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm listening to Unsolved Murders right now, and they just referenced one that's going to be looking at the West Memphis Three, which is something that I have a very big interest in because it has to do with the whole satanic panic. So I'm going to be listening to that one pretty soon.
We have to get to the satanic panic, and we will very, very soon. But I have to try to stay online for my notes here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as someone who does his own music when he starts a show because he's lazy, I really like that you have this kind of swelling music that kind of comes up as you're ready to throw it to break. It almost makes me think of like my Never to Happen Oscar speech where I'm like doing the robot, thanking all my people, and they're like playing me off. I want to be played off, so hopefully someday I'll get that opportunity. But I like that
I was going to say,
turn
you
the
can
music in.
just be on my show. We'll play you off.
Yes. I'll be like, wait, aren't the segments like 10 minutes long? I've been talking for 4 seconds and the music's already up. What's going on here? No, just you're special. You're
Yep,
special.
our music was actually by Brent Michael Davis, who's also a member of Minnesota Atheists.
Well, it's nice to have someone on the inside who can help you with the music.
That is true.
And Jeannie in the chat room suggests Ear Hustle as a podcast to listen to. I'm always afraid when I get
Ooh.
suggested podcasts just because I already listened to so many.
I know.
But it's good to know. And you said you had like a interest in the satanic panic. You wanted to talk about that because there's a little more to it. But
I
what are
was
your
going to say,
favorite?
try stopping me.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually how my friends and I decided that we were going to, start doing that once a month thing is the three of us did a show about the D&D and the Satanic Panic. And Dungeons and Dragons is specifically what I know the most about. But the Satanic Panic itself was about 30 years from 1970s to the 1990s of people panicking about everything. They panicked out the music. That's a big one most people know about. There was child care issues where people were accusing child care providers of sexually molesting, not just sexually molesting the children, but then also doing these satanic rituals involved. And I think like one of the accusations was they somehow killed a gorilla in a zoo. I mean, these things were really wild.
Before
But Dungeons
Harambe.
Yeah, before Harambe. Dungeons and Dragons was a large part of this because it was a fantasy-based game that came out, and a lot of televangelists, because this was kind of one of the big starts with that televangelist idea, were saying that D&D would, or Dungeons and Dragons, would teach kids how to do magic spells and how to summon demons. And I took a look at the first printing of the books and took a look at the spells. Yeah, there's no instructions for that. There still isn't. We're in fifth edition, and there's still no instructions on how to actually do the rituals.
Yeah, when these things come up, you kind of wonder. It's like, are they just trying to scare people, and sometimes you go, wait, they actually think this is real, or at least that people can do these kind of supernatural things, and that's
Mm-hmm.
almost as scary. But I was going to say there was a really good episode of Thinking Atheist on Satanic Panic, but I bet yours was better. Just saying.
I was going to say, I actually need to listen to that too, because I'm so curious about what Seth was talking about. And if anybody in the podcasting community wants to talk about the Satanic Panic, let me know.
So did it actually end? Because for me, I was thinking like, oh, this is something that kind of happened in the 80s, and then it kind of died out. But I guess in a way, probably never has really died out.
I don't really think so. Pat Robertson is still here, so he still brings it up whenever somebody brings up video games or anything like that. Televangelists and other people like that, they've gone up against Pokemon. Actually, video games is another huge one that they'll talk about. They've shifted their gaze away from D&D for the most part, but they've just replaced it with anything they don't understand.
I mean, like anytime there's like a hurricane, they blame it
Hmm.
on the gays, or
I know.
there's,
I'm like,
there's always something that it's some group of people that have no power. They pretend they have power, and that the Christians, who are 90% of the country, well, they're not 90%, but they pretend they are, have no power. It's a weird shift.
it is.
No, Teletubbies, there's a good one.
Oh yeah, that was
Was
another one
the
that they want to.
purple one the gay? There's a gay one. Oh no.
I know, and I was like looking, going, no, those it has nothing to do. These kids don't even understand what a triangle is yet. Because Teletubbies, I think, was geared towards 2 and 3-year-olds.
Yeah, well, you got started me on. Oh wait, that's what the religious does.
Oh.
Stop. It's sometimes it's just like, hey, stop doing the stuff we're doing. Stop doing the following
Hmm.
our playbook, even though that's not really happening. And you mentioned
No.
you were interested, or there was a what is it, Kickstarter, some kind of satanic panic RPG. What's this all about? And
Yes.
what are your plans? Your evil plans?
Oh, excuse me, cat hair. Um, the evil plan is there was a Kickstarter about the Satanic Panic in the fact that it's a role-playing game. So it's very similar to D&D in and in this role-playing game, you are police officers or other people in that in like kind of a law enforcement vein who are going after people playing D&D. And I really don't know a whole lot more than that. I'm hoping to get my copy. I think they said the end of February, and I am going to try and run a game.
Now, is this something you can actually do as like a Patreon thing, or is it too long over
Uh, it's
time
prob
thing?
it's probably going to be maybe some kind of Patreon thing. But how we would probably, because I'd love to get Matthew and Eric from the Odd Atheist Friends on for this, um, and then like those two, and then maybe Dan, and we'd probably have to do almost like a series.
Could be a
Because
limited series.
yeah, because well, it depends on how long the game itself goes. I've played D&D for the last few years, and a game itself can take 4 or 5 hours for a session in a long campaign that lasts months to years.
I feel like I don't totally understand what exactly a role playing game is. So can you talk about like what that? I mean, I know Dungeons and Dragons is a type of that, but what's the style of game, and like how many people play, and like you kind of mentioned
Mhm.
that it might be something that would take a few hours.
Yeah, so tabletop role playing is kind of the large name for it. Um, Basically, what you're doing is you are playing a character. So, do you play video games?
Yes.
Cool.
Although right now
Have
I'm playing like my Nintendo Classic, so that's kind of old
eh,
school.
have you ever played like Mass Effect?
No, but
Dang
like
it.
was Doom that kind of game from back?
Eh.
This is a throwback.
Yeah, I was gonna say Doom was more of a first-person shooter. More,
Okay, just shoot a bunch of stuff. That's not really, yeah.
yeah. Um, so you have two types of people who play a role-playing game, or two types of people in the role-playing game. You have the dungeon master or the game master, and that's the person who is running the game. They're the one who is telling the story. And then you have the players who are each different characters in your story. And the dungeon master, basically tries to lead them. Well, nicely, you don't want to railroad, nicely lead them to be like, okay, so this is kind of some interesting stuff and you should go that way. And then the players can either go that way or say, let's go over there. Let's go that way. Let's take a left. And then if you're the dungeon master, you have to try and figure out, well, how do I get it? How do I work this so that they have a good time? So it's an interactive story and you get to make the decisions for your character.
Sounds good. And can you maintain the character over multiple games?
Oh yeah. Um, though the running joke in the campaign I'm playing in is my characters don't last more than 2 games. I'm on my 3rd character.
What happens to your characters?
Um, they die, actually. Um, I'm playing with some people who are a little more gun shy with some of this stuff. So my character is the one who goes up and says, "I'm going to poke it." And
I see.
unfortunately, that has a hazard.
Yeah, that sounds like it would. Let me take a left turn and see where we go. Do you have like a personal religious background, or have you always been like a non-believer?
I was Catholic. I was raised Catholic. A fairly liberal Catholic though. Like my dad played D&D until I was about 5. Um, so
Your
and
second
the
generation D&D, nice.
yeah, actually he plays in the game that I play in, so that's kind of fun.
That is cool. Like my version of D&D is fantasy football, and my dad plays with me, so that's good. Kind of just make it a generational thing, right?
Sure.
Okay, I always heard of. I mean, you say like certain part of the country are known. I talked to a guy in Utah a few weeks ago, and he had like a Protestant family, and it's different because it seemed like, oh, Lutheran, that's Minnesota, right, or Protestant, and but
Yeah,
Catholics are everywhere, man.
they are. They are, and it's creepy. I had to go to mass because we visited grandma for Christmas. Man, I forgot how much they heap on the guilt. Holy crap.
Yeah.
It was like, forgive me for I have sinned every 5 seconds. I'm like, I don't remember feeling this awkward when I was a kid.
So was it like an official like, okay, I don't believe in this, or just like a gradual, just
It
because you
was a
had to go as a kid, it never really stuck.
it was a gradual in its own odd way. So a lot of people, what they'll do is they have all these questions and then they go to college and they realize they're not the only ones. That was not my experience. I didn't have a ton of questions. I just kind of went with the flow. And ended up going to an Assemblies of God college for 9 months. And that just kind of was a shock to the system. It was all of a sudden I was looking around and I was like, this is weird. These people, some of them still thought that D&D was a problem. And this is 2002. There were people who thought C.S. Lewis was a problem. And I'm
Oh
just like,
wow, that's one of their favorites.
I know,
I
I'm
guess
like,
not their favorites. That's
yeah, because I even argued. I was like, isn't he a Christian? And they're like, yes, but the talking animals. I'm like, you're 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 not making sense. So after that, it kind of faded very quickly, the official religion, and I dabbled in, oh, excuse me, I dabbled in some um, like Wiccan and things like that. And then eventually my mom actually, she and I argue about who went first. She was watching a video and she wanted me to watch with her because she wanted someone to watch with her. And it was like Dawkins and Hitchens, and they were just talking about their personal experiences. And then it was like, huh, these guys make a lot of sense. Let's just go this way.
well, it's nice you got to go with a parent. Usually can be a very lonely solo kind of thing.
I know. I've been super privileged on that front because then 2 or 3 years later, my dad, who was very, very Catholic, also very liberal, which is its own weirdness. But then he actually came over as well. And then my sister and brother were shortly after that.
Wow, the whole family except for grandma, right?
Well, yeah, Grandma's 97 now, so I really don't expect her to do much of anything.
Yeah, it's almost universal. It's like, oh, the old grandma, just let her do it. And then you like hear David's almost like, screw her, you know? And it's terrible for her too. I'm like, okay, that's nice.
I,
And you can say whatever you want. It's fine.
you can say what you want to your grandma.
Hmm.
I'm gonna let my grandma, have her thing because she's also actually getting dementia right now, so she's probably gonna forget what I said in 10 minutes anyways.
True, true. So since you're big, like into a lot of the science fiction, fantasy, is that what you also tend to read a lot of?
If I can. Unfortunately, I haven't read as much as I want to. And right now, actually, I've been reading a lot of business books because for work, we kind of have a book club where we meet up and we talk about these business books that we're all reading.
So what is the day job?
Accounting. I am accounts receivable, so I chase other businesses for money.
Okay, I like started accounting and then switched over to journalism and somehow got into marketing, which seems like what everybody's in these days.
Well, having some knowledge of accounting, no matter what job you has, is always good.
Yeah, always making everything even up at the end. Kind of like the old checkbook. I don't even know if people do checkbooks like that anymore. Do they like have to balance it?
I don't think so, not with the advent of online, because I don't balance. I just go on there every couple days and go, yeah, looks good.
Looks good, nice. Of course, you're in Minnesota, so I had to ask about what people think in your state about what happened with Al Franken and the whole political climate of the moment.
Um, it's definitely, I would say complicated is a big word for that, especially because Franken did a lot. I think he really did a lot of work to help women in the US. And then, this all this stuff came out. I was like, you know what? You've done some great stuff, but you've also been an ass, and you got to go. So, at least among my closer friends and such, it was yes, you need to resign. But I don't think angry is the right word. I was just really disappointed. There were some people who thought that the whole thing was made up, that it's a hoax or a conspiracy. Um, on one hand, the timing does look really weird with some of that, but then it was also right after the Me Too campaign. So I see where more people are willing to say things. Um, and it just, my focus right now is on the next election because I saw on Facebook today that Michelle Bachmann is thinking of running, and that can't happen. That's probably the worst case scenario right now is Michelle Bachmann.
Yeah, I feel like we've lost the bar. Like we have two bars for politicians, and really, if we want politicians to live to a certain standard, then clearly Al Franken wasn't up to the bar. And
Hmm.
I kind of get when people are like, well, the Republicans are letting their people stay in for the most part, and they really try to get Roy Moore in just because they wanted that vote. But at the same time, it's like, can we have a principle and stick by it? And after
Hmm.
all, they were going to, Minnesota has a Democratic governor. They're going to replace him with, I think it was the lieutenant governor. It was someone who's also a Democrat. So it was not
Yeah.
going to be a major shift. It was just that we had a lot. I don't know. I'd been following Al Franken since he was doing his, Rush Limbaugh's a Big Fat Idiot books back
Hmm.
in the day.
Well, and there was a lot of question about, who Dayton would put in, and there was, it was like you said, I think it was like the lieutenant governor or somebody, and there was a lot of contention about that, especially among the crowds of the people who are like, we don't want, the certain, we don't want too much business interested there. Of course, my thing is she's only going to be there for what, couple years maybe or something. She's not going to be there for long. There was one, just not even rumor, just people speculating or thinking of different people. And one was for Keith Ellison, who's a House representative in Minnesota. He is also a Muslim, and he's really progressive. He's really awesome. I think he's my representative since I moved, and that was one where I was like, I could see that. I could see Keith Ellison going in. That would be really interesting.
Yeah, and they almost, I mean, I think he almost became, I think, the leader of the DNC at one point, but
I think he's the co-leader.
he's
They did
definitely
something like that.
definitely high up on there. It's like all this, I don't know, it's okay. And it's okay in Minnesota. Get a Muslim. I mean,
Well,
they are
don't
around the
say that yet.
country. There are pockets of all kinds of different groups of people, and occasionally they get political representation. Unless you're in Georgia. Actually, Georgia just broke its like super majority Republican in the state, like
Holy
Senate,
crap.
but that was like one seat. We'll see if things shift because things
Yeah.
are. I mean, the demographics are definitely shifting in this area. We'll see if the parties follow suit.
Well, and that's one thing with Minnesota is Dayton is actually retiring this year. So our next governor election, either this year or the next, he's finishing his term, but then he's retiring. I think he was diagnosed with cancer, and so he very much has to step down, um, which is sad because he was a really good governor. Despite it's funny because his family owns the Target Corporation,
Hmm.
and he raised the minimum wage up to $9 an hour,
And
like
I was like, a
across the
business guy.
state.
Wait a second. Doesn't Target sponsor? Was it the baseball stadium or is it a mall? Well, obviously, because they're in malls.
Target Target Field,
Okay.
Target Field, which is a outdoor baseball stadium. Oh, and they have, I think there's the Target Center, which is like an event center in Minneapolis. So yeah, they're big. They're huge. But yeah, he's going to be retiring, and we have at least two strong Democratic candidates, um, both of whom I like and impressed with. So I'm hoping it doesn't come into one of those like I'm not going to vote because I didn't get the one I want. But I have not seen much for the Republican side, and I'm kind of hoping that it's a really bad candidate.
Yeah, it's. I was gonna bring up like movie reboots, but it seems like we're doing political reboots. Like Mitt Romney seems to be coming back. Michelle Bachmann is coming back. I mean, no, these like we need new people. That's the point. And I say quote unquote either side, but new people do need to come in because it seems like the old people they've had their time. Like literally, I still don't understand like Hillary and Bernie. It's like they're pretty old. Like you can't find another
Hmm.
Obama, someone in their 50s or who's a little younger, would energize people.
Well,
But
and
we'll see.
I've actually looked at the idea of like running for like a state legislative, like what's the pay and such, and they only make about, at least in Minnesota, they only make about $30,000 a year. So the idea of somebody being able to go full time into that, not necessarily very easy.
Seems like locally people kind of have other like a day job while they do it. But
Yeah, especially as women, oftentimes they'll have maybe a husband who makes enough that they can do that, or a lot of them will be on boards of directors and things like that. And it is definitely not a it's not as easy to break in, it seems, which is kind of sad.
well, have you been able to do like shows on local politics? Because I've been wondering. I always hear about like national politics, but I think it would be cool to kind of hear about different parts of the country, like their local politics and how it's set up.
Um, I would not mind it. I know there's at least one. there's at least a couple of representatives who have talked, because we do a Day of Reason at the state capitol, and we had a few of them actually come up and talk. I think this year we would actually probably skip it. Minnesota Atheists is a 501c3, which means that we are a nonprofit, and we actually have to stay away from election talk. We're political talk can be a very, very kind of a touchy bit. Like, we can't say we support as an organization any candidates. So it still comes up, like us well, because we're still people and our political stuff right now is crazy. But officially we got to be careful.
Well, if you do want someone who's run for office, if you've heard of Steve Hill, he actually ran for California Senate as a member of the Satanic Temple. Although he's clearly an atheist, he's actually a comedian too, and that's a pretty interesting story. Yeah, I could see the nonprofit angle might be a tough one to do, but just to even see, like, here's what the landscape is like. But
well, like I said,
we do need more, like, okay, we're just going to talk about here's what's out here, but it always comes off as you're supporting one side no matter how you do it.
Well, yeah, because like one of the things we do is for the Day of Reason, we open it up to any of the legislators. We're like, if you guys want to spend 5 minutes in front of the mic, go for it. You know, we're not going to stop you. Last year we had 5, I think, which was actually really impressive because usually I guess we only had like 2.
So you're going up. That's good.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, that was actually a really great one because I actually talked at that one, and there was a Planned Parenthood thing going on upstairs beforehand, and so one of the members who was also going to be at the Day of Reason, we both went up, and then we saw this woman in this Handmaid's Tale costume, and I was going to do a talk for the Day of Reason. I said, my talk for this, it's about the Handmaid's Tale. Could you please come down and make an appearance? And she did. And it was just so cool.
Those costumes are very popular these days. Anytime there's like a protest, it fits. Unfortunately.
Oh yeah. When they were making the show, apparently there was a large conservative Christian group or people who got all pissed off and was like, this is too political, and then people pointed out this book was written 30 years ago. So yeah.
Sometimes this is too political is like, you're being too political. I'm just fine.
We're just enjoying this show about a dystopian future. If you think that, we're being anti what you want, maybe what you want is a dystopian future?
It's like, yeah, but I want my dystopian future.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to talk about a very controversial subject, about movie reboots.
Oh boy.
How do you feel about the latest Jumanji movie?
Oh, I liked it.
Okay, you saw it. Oh,
I did, actually. We saw it on Christmas Day. We were visiting family, but most of them had plans because we kind of accidentally surprised them. So yeah, we went out and watched it, and I thought it was actually pretty good. I mean, it doesn't really reference the first movie, but they don't really have to.
True. Genie in the chat room. They made another one? Yes, they did.
It has The Rock, and The Rock is actually really funny, but without being like, so The Rock is playing a skinny, nerdy boy in The Rock's body. And it actually works.
Nice. When your War on Christmas episode, and I had to say,
oh gosh.
Hi Callie, hi Marissa, love both of you. You made a
hi,
comment.
Callie, hi Marissa.
You made a comment in that episode trying to combine, maybe it was someone on the show made a comment combining Star Wars and Star Trek. Why does that word never work with geeks? Why is there this strong, like I have to be a fan of Star Wars or Star Trek, or at least I have to prefer one of them? What's that all about?
I honestly don't know. I grew up with
Oh, I think I lost your audio there. Let me type here.
he hit the mute button.
I was like, nice work by the cat there.
Yeah,
Didn't really throw a wrench into the works until we were almost, almost done. So nice work. Cat's like, all
not
right,
bad.
time for pets or something.
I know. Well, he's been sitting on my lap. I've been petting him this whole time. He's finally just like, I'm done. I need something else. Um, I actually don't quite understand the the separation between Star Trek and Star Wars. They are two very different worlds. Star Trek is definitely more based in science. In fact, Gene Roddenberry very specifically made a very secular society for Star Trek, to the point where if you dig deep enough into, you have to go to like the cartoon they had. They actually talk about, you know, stripping away gods and not needing religion anymore. Um, and they try and base a fair amount of this on kind of a science-ish angle. Star Wars, on the other hand, is definitely more of the classic space opera. And so it's more of the fantasy tale, the hero's journey, and things like that. I don't think either of them are bad. I think sometimes it's just a personality type, and I really don't understand the the fight between them. Um, I will say though, if somebody asks me if the Enterprise could take on a Star Destroyer, the Enterprise will win.
Nice, nice. But do you have a preference, like in the reboots? I know the Star Trek movies are kind of like rebooting the entire
Oh.
series, while like Star Wars is continuing the story, but it's also kind of rebooting at the same
Mhm.
time.
Um, all right, we're going to start with Star Trek. I do not like what they've done with the new movies. I really don't. Star Trek has always been a place, it's actually always been fairly political. You know, Gene Roddenberry realized in the creation of Star Trek that if you put silver costumes on people and put them in space, you could be really political and nobody realized it. Like none of the people in the studios who were in charge of everything, they just didn't see it. So he used a lot of it to look at racism, to look at sexism. He wanted a 50-50 cast where it was 50% females, and the studio told him no.
Yeah, not at that
So,
time. Not even at this time,
no.
depending on the show you're watching.
Oh yeah. So it was a fascinating, progressive, and the movies just kind of dropped all of that bite, that good storyline. It's really disappointing. I have heard good things about the new show, though. I have not watched it
Oh,
yet.
that's on like some weird CBS channel. Now everybody's trying to do their own streaming service, so you have to
I
like
know.
sign up for all these different monthly things. Because I just saw like the reboot of Star Trek, and then like the second one, which was like the it's Wrath of Khan, but we're not going to call it that, and
Oh,
I barely remember any
everybody.
of it.
And that one actually is interesting because they whitewashed Khan. Khan
Hmm.
Noonien Soon, I believe, I think he was Indian, of Indian descent. And so to cast Benedict Cumberbatch, who I think is a fabulous actor, but it was also looking at it going, come on, really? This is not Star Trek. It was supposed to be a POC and you just dropped it. Okay, fine. Yeah.
White
Star
guys get
Wars on the other,
plenty of opportunities.
exactly. Star Wars on the other hand, I am absolutely loving. I'm impressed with what they're doing. I do kind of understand some of the fanboy, you know, some of them not liking some of the decisions made. No spoilers. Um, but I like what they're doing in general. And I also love, in an interesting contrast to Star Trek, the diversity that they are bringing to the franchise and to the geeky universe.
Well, I did think it was cool how they made Chewbacca gay. Okay, fake spoiler. Fake spoiler. That was not in the movie. Chewbacca's sexuality will remain nebulous. And that was a science star term. Clearly, we're getting to the end of the show. Now, since this year, last year was for me all about like kind of planning for different conferences. Are there any in the area or any you're planning to go to this year? Kind of in the
I always
atheist
go,
realm, maybe not. And then if there's
oh,
D&D realm, of course, I think about a bunch of atheists would probably still be interested, considering there's like the Venn diagram. There's a lot of interaction there, or intersection.
there is. So I always go to Convergence. At least I have for the last, well, it started a long time ago. Um, and then it was kind of on and off, and now I've been going the last 5 years for sure. But Convergence is a science fiction, fantasy, anime, general geek fan run convention. So it's not an industry, it's not like Comic-Con. And I always go there. And the last few years, Stephanie Zavon has actually been a big proponent of, or big has done a lot of work to bring in different atheist guests. So PZ Myers um, has been there at least 2, 3 years. I was actually on a panel with him last year, which was awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, but has been bringing in a lot of that um, atheist questions or science. The skeptics came for a few years. I think last year they pulled out, which is sad, but I hear that they're trying to do something on their own. So I'm really curious to see where that goes.
Yeah, I think another one would be David Fitzgerald, because he's done like the Jesus Historicity books, but he also writes science fiction too. So
Ooh.
there's a connection there. But gosh,
Oh,
we've made it here to an hour, but I'm about to interrupt you, so please continue.
no, it's because last one was Geeks Without God is actually a local podcast, and they usually do a live show there.
Be
That's
awesome.
it.
But that's
Oh
in
yes.
you said that's in your area, or is it different?
hmm it's in Bloomington.
Okay, but it's not like in the dead of winter, right?
No, it's over 4th of July weekend.
Okay. And what's the like? Is there a backstory for the name, the Hertzey Hertz?
Oh, um, kind of. It's a Hertzie is a childhood nickname that stuck. My legal name is a very popular name, which no, we're not going to share it because I don't like it.
Okay.
um, and it just stuck, and it kind of, I guess you could almost say, it kind of became its own thing for me, where that was my identity was Hertzie. Um, to the point where I've been toying with legally changing it.
Wow, making it your
Oh
real name.
yes. Yeah.
Well, now we're toward the end. Where can people track down your show and follow you?
All right. Well, Atheist Talk is on AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota. And you can find us on 9 a.m. on Sunday mornings. They have an app, or you can stream off the website if you're not in the area.
Sorry, listen to the background music. I'll
Oh,
play
yeah.
you off. You can talk as long as you want.
We also have a podcast, which is on iTunes, Google Play, and I think Stitcher. We have, we have the website, which I can't remember, but if you go to mnatheist.org, there's links to the show. And then you can email us at radio@mnatheist.org. Find us on Facebook at Atheist Talk and Twitter at Atheist Talk. I think I've got all of them now.
All the links will be in the show notes as always, so people can track you down. Now, if you want to support this show And who wouldn't? Well, many wouldn't, but that's okay. Be like Bobby, Hugh, Teody, Marissa. Go to patreon.com/Zachrilege, ZACHRILEGE, and it's usually harder for me to spell after I've not been drinking than after I have. We won't explain that for now. Follow me on Twitter at Zachrilege. You can like the Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook and send all love mail, all potential guests, questions, comments, whatever you want to zachrilege.cast@gmail.com. And again, thanks to Hertzey for being on tonight, and the kiddies, of course. For the listeners, stay safe. If you need to chat, I'm available. If you're an atheist and feel alone, you are not alone. Please reach out. Let's chat and get that human connectedness that keeps people coming back every Sunday. Stay skeptical. I love all y'all, and Pong Sound.